So it's finally time to start building PCs with Ryzen CPUs in them, and this first PC I have here is the 8-core 16-threaded Ryzen 7 1700 build. We're using a GTX 1080 and the performance is amazing. Welcome back to Tech City. This is the Yes Man Brian coming to you guys today with the first of many Ryzen builds. Now Ryzen is hit hard when it was released with price performance, and the updates that have been spiraling through have only kept increasing the performance to the point where it's a really good recommendation, not just for single player games, but now for multiplayer games too. And you'll find out today when I do some of those benchmarks. But as with all the PCs that get built around here, we'll start off with the build, then we'll do the benchmarks. For today's parts list, we're going with the Ryzen 7 1700, which is an 8-core 16-threaded CPU from AMD. It's overclockable and it offers some of the best price performance out there in the CPU market today. And then on the graphics card, we have the GTX 1080 from Strix, which is really cool, it's really quiet, and it overclocks extremely well. And then to overclock all this, we need the V650 from Coolermaster, gold-rated power supply, huge amount of amps on the 12-volt line, and then we're putting all that in a Coolermaster 5T Pro, which is a really premium case that features tempered glass. And then to cool the CPU, we're using the 240mm Pro version of Coolermaster's latest CPU coolers. And then on the storage, we have a 2TB SSHD from Seagate, which carries a 5-year warranty and is a really good budget option if you want a lot of storage and you still want to keep things sped up. As for the motherboard, we are using the X370 Carbon Gaming Pro from MSI, which is a very solid price performer in the lineup of X370 motherboards. And then lastly on the memory, we have 16GB of DDR4 from Giel, the Evo X. This is RGB memory that also has two profiles of overclocks in there, one being 2933 MHz and the other being 3200. Now this brings the whole total of this build to $1,687 US, or if you're in Australia, it brings it to 2,385 Australian dollars. So now we're going to quickly talk about overclocks. The GPU, the GTX 1080 I put in here, this managed to go over 2.1 GHz stable, and it did so with very low temperatures. The CPU in this case, it only managed to hit 3.85 GHz on all cores, which I was a little bit disappointed with, considering on another configuration with this exact same CPU, I managed to get this CPU up to 4 GHz stable. So I'm not entirely sure what's going on here with this setup, though with that said, let's run the benchmarks. So there it is, the PC is complete and it was running every single game I threw it at 1440p with exceptional frame rates. Even that latest title, Prey, managed to get around about 140 FPS. Now I asked you guys on Twitter which games you wanted me to benchmark. Prey was one of those, but also people requested Rainbow Six Siege. So I threw that in there and did the in-house benchmark, and again at 1440p Ultra, this PC managed to pull off around 140 frames. So if you are at 1440p and you do have a high refresh rate monitor like some of those high-end 144Hz IPS panels, then you can get some really good frame rates out of a setup pretty much identical to this. The GTX 1080, that thing is still a beast, even though the 1080 Ti is out. 1080 Ti is really an overkill graphics card in a lot of cases, and this build just shows that. The 1080, even when it's overclocked, it just gives you guys exceptional frame rates, and coupled with that R7 1700, when you overclock that, the frame rates are also very high. Although the goodness doesn't just stop there with this build. One thing that really blew me away was the performance now in Dota 2. So when I went to the AMD conference in Sydney, they were telling me that they were working with the game developers to optimize their multiplayer titles, two of those being CSGO and Dota 2. And I must say, when I tested both these games, the frame rates were exceptionally high. Dota 2, even at 1440p, which I should have been probably testing at lower settings, it was still managing to score now in the 200 FPS mark. And I know when I tested this a couple of months ago, it was getting around low 100s. So I was really surprised and really happy to see that the Ryzen CPUs are also getting optimizations for multiplayer games. And this is also another reason why I've held back part 3 of my comparison with the 7700K versus the R7 1700 versus the dual Xeons, because I wanted to let the updates flow through, not just with the hardware, but also with the games, to let Ryzen perform at its absolute best before I made a solid recommendation on those CPUs. Also, some things that I wanted to touch on before I get out of here is some of those build samples that were sent over for this build. The MSI X370 Carbon is a pretty solid motherboard. It's not as good as some of the more expensive options out there, but if you're looking to get onto Ryzen on an X370 board, then it certainly does look really good and it performs pretty decent if you're on a budget. Also, Coolermaster did send out their 240mm Pro cooler. That did a pretty good job. I didn't see temperatures rise over around about 77 degrees. That was the max with this overclock at around 1.4 volts. And also their Coolermaster V650 power supply did do a pretty good job of providing all these parts with power. Nothing really shut off or anything didn't really get close to getting near the limit of this power supply, as you can see there with the power consumption in a Firestrike combined benchmark. And also the last part that they sent out was the Coolermaster 5T Pro. This is a really exceptional case, albeit it is very expensive too. It's going to be usually double what you would expect to pay for a case. However, on that note, it does have tempered glass, it does come with 3 140mm fans, and it just honestly has a really good premium feel to everything. I didn't have one problem building in this case, and the final look is absolutely gorgeous. Anyway guys, if you enjoyed today's video, then be sure to hit that like button and let me know in the comments section below, what would you do differently if you had a similar budget? And also on that note, I will be putting an extra list in the description below for some people who want to get similar parts but don't have as much money as today's build. I'll be putting in some cheaper parts in there where you can save on things but still get that R7 1700 and also still get that GTX 1080. So I look forward to your comments as always, and I'll catch you guys in another tech video very soon. Peace out for now. Bye.